Hello, okay, here we are back together again. And the sentence for today is prior to, prior to, prior, antes, before, it's the same, prior to. Prior to getting a job here, o sea, anterior, con anterioridad a, prior to, o sea, antes de conseguir un empleo aquí, me sentí un tanto fuera de lugar. I felt somewhat out of place. Prior to getting a job here, o sea, before getting a job here. Prior to getting a job here, I felt, me sentía, me encontraba. I felt somewhat, todo junto, some como alguno, what como que. Somewhat means un tanto fuera de lugar. Me sentí un tanto incómodo. Fuera de lugar, diríamos en inglés muchas veces. Out of place. I felt somewhat. Totally no. Little no. Somewhat out of place. Prior to getting a job here. Hello again, back for another sentence. Are you ready? Another lesson. Let's begin. Sentence. Prior to getting a job here, I felt somewhat out of place. Prior to getting a job here, I felt somewhat out of place. Sí. Antes de conseguir un empleo, un trabajo aquí, me sentía algo fuera de lugar. Un tanto fuera de lugar. Somewhat. Curiosa palabra, somewhat. Out of place. Y muy importante palabra. Pero vamos al principio. Prior to. Prior to es una forma latina para decir before. Before. Con prioridad a. Bueno. Prior to se usa, por eso lo enseñamos. Prior to, getting, gerundio después de to. Before getting, que también es prior to es una preposición igual que before. Prior to sustituye a before. Si utilizas before es fantástico y puedes olvidarte de prior to para el resto de tu vida. No pasa nada, pero lo vas a oír de vez en cuando, o bastante. Prior to getting a job here, I felt somewhat out of place. Priority. Prior to getting a job here, I felt somewhat out of place. Prior to.
I've never worked with so many disobedient people in my life. And that is saying a lot. Because prior to working here, I worked with children. And prior to working with children, I worked with animals. I bet you didn't know that. Did you know that? Did you know that prior to working here, I worked with children? And prior to working with children, I worked with animals? That's right. Say it with me. Prior to working here, I worked with children and animals. Yeah. Prior to working here, I worked with children and animals. And prior to that, prior to working with children and animals, I was in the Army. I bet you didn't know that. Can you believe it? I know, I don't look like someone who would have been in the Army, but I was. And the Army taught me a lot. But that was prior to all my jobs. But the Army taught me everything that I know in life. Yeah, it taught me to be strict and it taught me to be tough. But I've never worked with so many disobedient people. I think I need to start using some of the tricks I learned in the Army here at the hotel. I'm gonna show the staff because I've never worked with so many disobedient people. They're gonna learn what it means to be tough.
Okay, part 2 in our sentence. Are you ready? Prior to getting a job here, antes de conseguir un trabajo aquí, prior to getting a job here, job, no job, job here, I felt, me encontraba. I felt somewhat out of place. No del todo, pero algo fuera de lugar me sentía. Este sitio no es mío, pero ahora que tengo un buen trabajo aquí ya es como mi hogar. Okay, como mi casa. Prior to getting a job here, I felt somewhat, todo junto, some como alguno, what como que. Somewhat, un tanto. Estoy un tanto cansado hoy. Estoy algo cansado hoy. I'm somewhat tired. Somewhat. Se usa mucho, en inglés, De hecho, se usa tanto que yo recuerdo buscando específicamente en mi primer año en España cómo decir somewhat en español. Y decía un tanto. Estamos un tanto enfadados. We are somewhat angry. Estamos algo enfadados. We are rather angry or somewhat angry. Yes, and our friend, prior to getting a job here, he felt somewhat out of place.
Hi guys, Felicity here. Guys, did I ever tell you about my old job? Did I ever tell you? I was an animadora, a cheerleader. Give me an F, give me an E, give me an L, give me an I, give me a C, give me an I, give me a T, give me a Y. Felicity! To be honest, guys, I felt somewhat silly being a cheerleader. I felt somewhat silly. I felt somewhat ridiculous sometimes. Jumping about, having fun, shouting. Oh, I felt somewhat silly. Repeat with me. I felt somewhat silly. Oh, perfect. Can you imagine me? Say, I felt somewhat ridiculous. Oh, perfect. I mean, can you imagine me with pom-poms and a little dress, jumping about all day? Oh, I felt somewhat silly, I did. And I always had to be energetic. I felt somewhat tired at the end of every day. But you know, I prefer my new job. Here in the hotel, I love it. I mean, I get to entertain guests, I get to have lots of fun. Fun. I did. I felt somewhat silly in that old job.
Okay, number 3, part 3 of our sentence. Prior to getting a job here, I felt somewhat, una medida fuera de lugar. I felt somewhat out of place, fuera de lugar. Creo que en español se dice lo mismo, más o menos. No me sentía aquí a gusto, que no, este sitio no era mío. No. Ahora sí, in place. I feel in place. I feel at home. I feel at home. Prior to getting a job here, I felt totally out of place? No, somewhat out of place, to feel out of place. I feel out of place here, out of place, out of place, out of place, out of place, out of, pronunciación, out of place. Okay, the word of the day. Ejecutivo en inglés, executive, fácil, pero lo digo por la pronunciación. ¿Cómo se dice el plural de huevo? Egg, one egg, two eggs. Eggs, sonido de Z en inglés. Letra Q. Executive. Casi con un F al final. Executive. Practice that word.
Olé! Look at this place. Another beautiful day in Spain. I love it here. I feel so comfortable here. I never feel out of place here in Spain. Never. I never feel out of place. Back home, well, where I come from, I used to feel out of place sometimes. Eso es, fuera de lugar. Out of place. Out of place. I felt out of place. But not here. No, that's right, I never feel out of place in Spain. I feel very comfortable. I feel really at home. If I'm watching a flamenco show, I don't feel out of place. If I'm on the terraza with my friends having a caña, I never feel out of place. It feels very natural to me. When I'm speaking Spanish to my Spanish friends, I never feel out of place. Now, when I talk to foreigners, I feel a bit out of place. But with other Spaniards, like me, come on, I'm practically Spanish, I never feel out of place. The only thing that makes me a bit different is one legal document, my citizenship. And pretty soon I'm gonna have that. And once I have that, I'll be just like any other Spaniard, and I'll never be out of place.